Welcome. I'll be facilitating the call today. And again, we are going to be focusing this champion chat on engaging faith congregations. Angela and Barb with Fostering Hope has had a lot of experiences, and we're hoping to learn from them today. So what we're going to do is I'll review the goals, like why are we doing this champion chat? I'll do some introductions. Bevan will be asking some questions, and we'll have folk from Fostering Hope to answer the questions with us, and then we'll have a deeper dive conversation. So I'll unmute all those who are muted, and you'll be able to ask more questions, get some clarification. If you've had experiences that you'd like to share, that would be an opportunity for you to do that at that time. And then we have some closing remarks from Eunice, and so we're really excited that Eunice is able to join us today. I'll go more into this in a second, but Bevan Gray Rogel, and she is with the Encore Tampa Bay. Then we have Angela Karen, and Angela is with Fostering Hope Foundation, and then Barbara Laura, and Barbara again is with Fostering Hope Foundation as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about what each one of them do at Fostering Hope and at Encore Tampa Bay. Those of us that you'll hear from on the call, we have Eunice. She's the VP and campaign director with Gen to Gen at Encore. We have Duncan, and Duncan is doing some of the behind the scene tech stuff for us today, and he's with Operations and Digital Engagement Associate with Gen to Gen at Encore. And again, I'm the Leadership and Mobilization Manager with Gen to Gen at Encore as well. So why are we doing this? So the Gen to Gen team came together and thought about all the things that champions bring to the table and all the information experiences that they have. And we thought, what's a really good way of bringing champions together to learn from each other and to share with each other? And we brainstormed lots of ideas. Michelle, who's on the call, thought about how do we capture really short conversations for other champions. And so we came up with this idea of champion chats. And so we really want to have an informal chat among Gen to Gen champions, having them share and learn from each other, and then again capture that conversation, specific tools and tips on a variety of topics. And today, again, we're talking about engaging faith congregations, but further chats will be talking about different topics. And then we want to make sure, and Duncan will be helping us do this, post these conversations on Gen to Gen platforms so that we can further the learning impact among all champions. So those are the primary goals. So we have Bevan. Bevan is going to be asking the questions. Bevan is the president and founder of Encore Tampa Bay. And Bevan actually has an event coming up soon with a mega congregation in her area. And so this is a very timely conversation for Bevan. Angela, as I said, is on the call, and Angela definitely has hope, and she is the executive director of Fostering Hope Foundation. And again, they have lots of really good information about engaging congregations. And Angela is also one of the Encore Prize semifinalists. And so we're really excited to have her on the call sharing information with us. And then Barbara, and again, Barbara is on the ground doing the work with churches and congregations of all type. And she's going to share with us some information about the work that she's done. And she's the supervising program coordinator for the Fostering Hope Foundation as well. We want to get into sort of the chat portion of the conversation. So just to let everyone know, Bevan is going to ask a series of questions, and Angela and Barbara will answer the questions. We'll have sort of a chat between the three of them around these questions, and then we'll sort of do a deeper dive, and we'll open the lines. And if anybody has additional questions, or again, things that you want to share, or you wanted to sort of do some follow-up on something that was shared, then that would be the opportunity to do that. So at this point, I want to pass it over to Bevan, and Bevan, take it away.
Thanks, Carmi. Let's start with the first question. Describe the work you have done with some of the faith communities, maybe just a very brief overview of what that's looked like.
Well, the major work that we've done with faith communities is partnering with them for our program. We start out working, recruiting volunteers from the different faith communities to assist our foster families in the community where they live. And as we go, those relationships develop between the faith community and the foster family and the team members, and then bigger things come from that, bigger things than what perhaps the teams themselves could do, but the whole faith community embraces the family.
What has been some of your greatest successes in partnering with faith congregations, and what do you think made them successful? So just a couple brief examples of things that have really worked, and what was the secret?
We've been doing this for 12 years now, and so I think that the fact that most churches are still with us today, and they continue to refer other churches to us, and the churches that began with us are still allowing us to partner with them. So I think longevity is really kind of a success. And the fact that they trust us with their people, with their congregants, I think because we have been able to bridge denominations. We work with many, many different kinds of faiths and non-denominational churches as well. So finding out how to work with lots of different subcultures within those faiths, I think, has been a success. Barb, would you like to say a couple of others, and then we can get to why we think maybe it's worked?
I think the success, looking a little bit more specifically, the success has been with families who have gone through crisis, and the congregants have been able to rise to the level to be of real support to them. We've had faith communities who were willing to go out and act on their mission of being a welcoming committee to transgender foster families, and that was a real success for one of our families who, honestly, we were having a little bit of trouble matching to a faith community because they were same-gender foster parents. But this faith community came in, and not only did this particular family find support, they also found a church home where they could even bring their family in and be more embraced as congregants, not just as people receiving assistance. And also for some of our foster families who are already participants in the faith community that helped them, there's just been a deeper level of relationship where their children, even though they're not actively involved anymore, they go up and they hug and greet the congregants who have been in their home, who have taken care of them and taken them places. So there is a real bond with them beyond just the fostering hope structure.
So you brought the foster families that took on some of these children, you matched them together, and was that in an event, or just did that kind of on the side with matching them up?
We match each family up with a congregation so that the congregation can fully establish relationship with them, and it's not just a handout, but it is really a reciprocal relationship. Some of the families are non-church or don't attend a faith community, but those faith communities have been able to embrace them. And then for those, we do have a few foster families who are already members of a faith community, and the communities that they're involved in become again, a deeper level of relationship and our lifelong sorts of support to the family, even after they've been released from the Fostering Hope program.
One of our goals with Gen to Gen Tampa Bay is to really look at faith organizations to be outreach partners for our campaign. And I think for us, the big question is kind of what has worked for you in you've been around for 12 years, but for those of us who have not been doing this for a while, is how do you get in the front door? How do you, who do you contact? What are things that you say that can be helpful for other Gen to Gen champions when they're trying to do this?
It is tough, Bevan. And don't let toughness be discouraging to you. I think it's sort of universal and goes with it. Something we found really helpful is if there is someone who is a member of that congregation who would take the need to the pastoral staff or the pastor, him or herself, and especially the senior pastor. That seems to make a real big difference. So if there's an internal champion of some sort, that's really been helpful. We've also benefited from when one church has had a positive experience by working with us, then asking that someone from that church to call another one that we might be interested in, or asking them what church do they think might be interested in this one as well. When we first started, I do think that this was helpful to us. We were a very different type of organization, and we're really laying down new ground. So we did a lot of focus groups with who would become our stakeholders eventually. And so I think the focus groups that we had with pastors and pastoral staff was really helpful because they taught us how to approach them, what would work and what didn't work. And I'd have to say we earned their trust by asking them. And so some of the people that were in our focus groups were some of our first churches. So I think that unbeknownst to us, that became a tactic, but it really helped us know what were the boundaries for churches. I think that we've also had some success in that we understand that our mission may or may not be their mission. That church entity exists for its own reason. And so what we try to do is try to talk about where our mission and our work aligns with theirs, and try to address some of the concerns that they might have up front. Two of the biggies that they had told us in our focus groups, and that we've learned time and time again, is that they are so busy. They get asked so much of everybody in the community. And sometimes there can be a little burnout. Like I remember one pastor saying, "Oh no, not another program." And for them, a lot of times programs come and go. The church might sign up, but the folks tend to leave them and won't roll up their sleeves and help them out. So one thing we offer to them is that they don't have to run this. We facilitate the administration, we facilitate the relationships, we support the volunteers, and we have a professional facilitator for each team and each church, so that the pastor and pastoral staff doesn't have to take that on. And we're pretty upfront with them about what we do ask for, and that is meeting space for the team meetings, sometimes going back to the church to recruit more volunteers if there's some natural attrition, and then also support from the pastor or the pastoral staff for the volunteers themselves, if they encounter some of the pain and the suffering they see with the children in the foster families. It can shake their faith, or it can be an opportunity to have their faith grow through the hardship. And if we're upfront with them like that, it seems to earn trust. We also don't ask them for a donation. They end up donating. Many of them end up donating to us, but we don't ask for for that. They're pretty tapped out a lot of times.
Thank you. These are great, great tips. And it kind of blends to the next question, which is really about kind of what, how do you how do we keep them engaged and enthusiastic and about their connection with the organization?
Well, that's sort of the magic that happens when relationships form. It's not just a volunteer to client sort of relationship. It's much more like extended family, and they truly develop affection and care for the families they work with. They don't, with faith community volunteers, they do not want to be thanked necessarily for the work that they do. We've tried it. We've done breakfast, we've done awards, and they don't turn out for those kinds of things. They much rather would just be able to serve, to love, and to have the support when they need it. We do try to recognize their efforts by ways of, in our recorded notes of our work together, we give credit where credit is due. Sometimes when the foster families are so tired, they don't think about saying thank you. The staff comes in and gives the high fives to the volunteers. And then the foster parents, they take the cue, and then they often come around afterward and say, yes, we couldn't have done this without you. And the cohesion that we try to build among the team members themselves through their service also is a way to keep them involved. We do try to utilize at times the faith community structure itself to recognize the work that they've done, but that's not big on their list.
Yeah,
they really just want to be able to serve and love.
Good. Thank you, Barbara. What are some other specific ways that you can foster these critical relationships? We want to take it one step further.
Well, a lot of what we train our volunteers in being what's known as ministry of presence. So it's not always about doing for, but being with. And so oftentimes that takes more time than just cooking a meal or doing an errand. But that does solidify those relationships when they begin to feel the burden that the foster parent carries, when they become engaged in relationship with the youth and the children. This does help engage them in a much deeper way. We also don't want them to overextend themselves. This is a way to protect your volunteers when they want to help and you sense that maybe they're signing up for a little too much, gently bringing other people in to take over some of that so no one feels overwhelmed or overextended.
I'm sure the church appreciates that because, like Angela was saying, they're busy with other things and they're doing you a favor, right, helping with all of that.
In terms of the ministry of presence, we find that, in this hurried, busy world, we're just so inclined to wanting to do. And it's important that our coordinators often help the volunteers take stock of when they're not seeing change very fast or they're not really sure about the results of their service because they want it to be meaningful. The volunteers or the coordinators often really help them take a step back, remind them of the things that have happened over time, because the volunteers lose perspective on that. And they just remind them of what it means to be present to someone else. And maybe they tell them some of the things that the foster parents have said to the coordinators, but may not have remembered to say to the volunteers. And in addition, the coordinators are really good about giving ongoing routine reports back to the congregation and to the pastor that talks about the results of the work. And maybe some of the results on the volunteers as well. The fact that there is this longevity, very few drop away other than for life events. And they say that they find meaning in the service. So they give that report back as well. And I think that that's been pretty helpful.
Yeah, it's kind of like you're seeing them as a client. So you're helping them see, the results of the way that they're offering up their congregations and how it's helping your clients. So I think that makes sense. Good.
And when there have been some very painful things that have happened, like for instance, if, we always want that the kids are able to go back to their biological families and that those families are ready to prepare a safe environment for them. When it's happened before that kiddos went back and the foster parents weren't really sure that it was the best thing for the kids. And as the foster parent feels, the volunteers do often as well. So there's often grief and loss feelings. And so sometimes the coordinators have helped to just mark that in time and say it out loud for the volunteers and for the foster families. And some of our volunteers have actually created, I guess I would say a ritual, a ritual of
coming to closure.
Yeah, and giving that child up to God and praying for that child's safety and well-being, and knowing that it's not really our world. And I think that has helped to keep them engaged as well.
Great. Thanks, Angela. So what are some other things that we, want to consider about the faith congregation that, and a lot of what I'm hearing you say is that the congregations are working more hand in hand with the specific programs that are there. And I know some of the Gen to Gen champions that are out there are using the Movies and Mentors recruiting event as a way to recruit congregation members. And so just your thoughts as you've worked with the churches is that, what are things that we need to consider when working with the faith congregation and recruiting adults? So in just general ways.
Well, I think one thing is, and I think we've already mentioned this, is to make sure that what you're asking of them aligns with their mission statement, to recognize that there are going to be some faith communities that it's a great fit, and there might be other faith communities that would have a struggle with it. That's one thing to consider. Another thing is to consider that they do need someone like a coordinator to lead them. They may not be familiar with what your organization is trying to do, and they need someone that they can have confidence in with regular contact, and someone to lead them and give them the next step if they need it. They need to have the backing of their pastoral staff. If they have a sense that their pastor is behind the effort, it will encourage them much more. So that's a real important thing to gain is the pastoral nod, to encourage them to participate. Angela, I know I'm forgetting some things. Can you help me out with this?
You're doing great. I think in terms of recruitment and solicitation of volunteers, I'll be very honest, we have not found events to be as successful as tailoring something specific for that particular church community. Every church community has its own culture, and so what we've done is asked the pastoral staff. We've kind of told them what we typically do, and then asked them if that would be a good fit. And if it's not, we ask them what's their typical way and what do they suggest, and we just work really hard within that within those boundaries. There is sort of a pattern that we've found that helps a lot. It is having a very quick solicitation, and if they allow us to be there right on the pulpit, it's pretty quick. It's 90 seconds, sometimes even 2 minutes. And it's down to the heart of it, and we're right there in the narthex afterwards.
Yeah. So know your pitch, right?
Know your
know
pitch.
what you're asking for, and not go into. That's
many congregations, especially if you're going, Bevan, to a mega community, a mega church. Many of them really prefer and like to have videos.
Yeah.
And they really like that. They're used to that, and so having a quick video that just lets lets the congregation know what you're about and how it aligns with their mission, like looking up on their website in advance, how do they see themselves, what's the culture of that, and really speaking to that.
No, I appreciate that, because I think sometimes we just get so excited about the program that we want to do that we're not stepping back and being sensitive to, what's the best way. And that's kind of a little bit of what we did with our mega churches. We didn't jump in and go, this is the setup and this is how it's going to work. But we just said, here's the goal. We want to recruit adults for the youth serving organizations. And then we thought this movie might be a good way to do it. And so then they were like, okay, well, let's figure out maybe the best format for doing that. So I think your advice is don't, hear from them, what would fit best with the culture that's there. I guess this is just in general, what else would you want to share with Agenda Gen champions about working with faith congregations? I think you've given us some great advice already, but is there anything else that would be good for people to know?
Well, one thing I think that we have to honestly understand is what the faith communities, what are their sensitive points, what are they willing to accept and not accept, and not go in with something that might be offensive to them. I know that might sound a little old school, but people give from what they have, and everyone is walking a separate journey, and we can utilize people from all different backgrounds and all different belief systems if we're willing to be a little flexible and accept where they are and allow them to participate to the point that they can. So, there are some, we'll use the transgender industry just because it is still a pretty hot topic within different faith communities. But if you know that this particular faith community is not a welcoming community, then just be sensitive enough to know, don't use pictures or don't bring in videos that are going to portray part of that lifestyle, because that's going to close a door for you. That doesn't necessarily have to be closed.
And good point too is just know who your audience and be sensitive to where they're coming from.
Yes. And just because we don't agree with them doesn't mean they still don't have a lot to offer.
Right. Good. Well, thank you so much, Angela and Barb. This was very good, just really helpful for me in thinking about what I needed to do with my event that's coming up in 2 weeks. Thank you.
You're welcome. We wish you luck, Bevan.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
That was absolutely wonderful. So Bevan and Angela and Barb, a big round of applause. Yay. Thank you for allowing us to listen in on a great conversation. We want to do a deeper dive. So you all gave a lot of great advice. And I think some of the follow-up questions, Bevan, really helped us learn a lot about what Fostering Hope is doing, and some great tips about how to connect with congregations. I want to invite the staff to ask a follow-up question or give a comment as we use this last sort of 20 minutes to do a deeper dive, and then we'll start to close. Well, we'll 10 to 15 minutes with the deeper dive, and then we'll start to close. But any of the staff members have follow-up questions or any comments that you all want to make at this time?
So this is Eunice, and thank you guys for sharing some of your experience and knowledge in this area. One question I have for anybody on this call, including staff, is in my experience, often faith communities can be, not always, but they can be incredibly age segregated places where there's a seniors program that happens usually at like 6 a.m. in the morning, and then there are children's programs that are very separate, and then programs for families. You kind of end up in a track. Do you have you found anything in terms of what it's like to go in with a gen-to-gen recruitment pitch specifically for older adults? If you're walking into a church where the generations are really kept separate, does it help to find churches that have more intergenerational programming built in already? Or are there ways as you've gone in to talk to them where you've been able to kind of help with some of the culture change that could happen in faith communities around casting a vision for bringing those generations back together? In some ways, going back to the way things were for many, many generations.
Yeah, well, I would say that because we were all young, and then we were all maybe not so young, and then if we aged, we've been aged. It's something that is part of our DNA, part of our fabric. It's a frame of reference we all have. So I think the tapping into it, I can't imagine that it's that difficult because it's something that we all know about. In terms of recruitment, we found that everybody goes to services. So finding everybody together, you'll often find families together there, and they tend, there are some that, older people tend to attend and younger families tend to attend because of the time differences. We go to all of them on a weekend and recruit from all of the services. And so you are able to reach everybody at that time. We have not had as much success if we have recruited from the different small groups that a church might have. Occasionally we've done that, like the 55 plus club or the seniors. But in terms of solicitation, we generally do it to the general audience and just try to hit them all. I don't know if that answered your question, Eunice.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Do you have a hypothesis on why you've been less successful in recruiting from the more specific kind of 50 plus smaller groups? It seems like that would be such a sweet spot. Are they already tapped out, already incredibly involved, or are they more internal facing and interested in serving the church community, but not necessarily going outside?
Yeah, Barb, I'm sure we'll have some wisdom here, but I think one big reason is because we found that if the pastor is standing right by you during your solicitation and gives a nod,
starts at the top.
Really take it seriously. So maybe that it may also be that when people are coming to events outside of services, their mind is really on that event and the socialization that might be there, or the particular ministry that might be there. They may not be as prepared to hear the message. Barb, do you have some other thoughts there?
Well, I have a couple of different thoughts. I think that age group you're talking about, we find that a lot of our volunteers fit that age group, and they miss their own grandkids. Their grandkids live in different states, and when we talk about extended family and youngsters and having fun together, sharing meals together, they love that. They're looking for that, and they can't have it with their own kin. So to be able to offer that to someone else really strikes a chord with them. I also like to, and this is going down a little different rabbit hole, but when you're asking to meet with church staff to talk about recruiting, I think it would be a great idea to bring both the youth pastor and perhaps the community life pastor or the executive pastor together, whatever that looks like within that particular faith community, and let them start talking about well, how could this work? How could we, how could we get our kids and our older folks together? And that would be some influence that would be perhaps not what you are looking for, but it could be the start of something beautiful for that faith community.
Mm-hmm.
So I would encourage something like that.
Hi, this is Eileen, and I'm partnership manager for Gen to Gen, and I work with a lot of really great partners like yourselves. Love to have you be a partner, by the way. But beyond that, I was just reflecting on some of your really great advice about the importance of aligning with their mission and being very careful to do that investigation before working or approaching a church. And you talked about how sometimes what you're trying to talk about really aligns well with a church's mission, and sometimes it might not. And I was just wondering if I could get an example of either of those cases, like a church where you felt very approachable because the alignment of missions with what your mission was, and then another church where it just really wouldn't work. And I was wondering if you could just share an example of either of those cases.
Well, for an example of what really we thought was going to work well was we found a couple of faith communities that already had groups within their congregation that included foster families and adoptive families. And we thought, oh, they already know this, and they are already on board and supporting of this. But what we found is that they were tapped out themselves. They were just trying to find ways to survive the foster care experience. And so they really didn't have much to give others. They were just trying to keep themselves, afloat. But what does work well is when you look at maybe their mission statement, maybe look at the ministries they're already involved in. If they're reaching out to perhaps at-risk youth, if they have programs for father and son things, or maybe they have a literacy reading group, opportunities for older adults to interact with younger ones already, I would think that would be a sweet spot. I think the ones and I don't want to be overgeneralizing or casting shadows on any particular group, but there are some faith communities who are very excited and very purposeful on their evangelizing, and sometimes they put that agenda first always, and we have to be very careful about that because children in foster care have rights, and foster parents have to protect those rights of religion. And so those particular faith communities, we just know that it would be a struggle for them to work with us.
Just one more thing to add onto that is we have learned that what might be bad timing for a church now and not in alignment tends to change over time. So it's a organic structure and it changes over time, and so sometimes the ground is ready for this type of a program or ministry, and sometimes it just it's not. They need to work on some other things first. Mm-hmm. But then if you can leave a foot in the door and say, may I check back in with you? If the pastor is interested, always check back in with them. We've certainly had times when it's been a no, and then we've gone back 1, even 2 years later, and then it's been a great partnership.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Sure.
Karima, this is Michelle. I have a question about language. So you didn't give a specific tip about using language like service and love and faith in how you talk with people, and I wonder how much that's important in the way that you or someone from the faith community makes the ask, or whether it's more important to understand the way that the church thinks about mission in the world and just use your own language as you would with any other community.
in general, most people are pretty accepting and they know what you're trying to say. But if here again, this is part of that tailoring. So if there are some obvious things up front, I think it's been helpful. For instance, our program we describe as a ministry of presence. Now, to some churches, they're familiar with that term. To others, like Bevan, the one that you'd be going to, they would not use that term. They would use ministry of relationship. So there are some things that can be helpful, but in general, it's not usually off-putting if you don't use the right one. Barb, do you want to say more to that?
Yeah, I think that covers it. I think it would be more off-putting to try to use their own language if you weren't confident in it. I think they will hear your heart, and they will understand what you're asking if you're just clear and comfortable and confident in what you're saying yourself. So I can understand why people would think it would be important, but honestly, the message is the thing, however you want to convey it, as long as it's done honestly and with integrity, and they see your passion.
Hi everyone. I'm Karita Brown. I'm the Director of Leadership and Learning and the campaign. And thanks so much for sharing your experience and ideas. One thing, just as a follow-up question, you mentioned that you figured out how to communicate with different subcultures within the faith. That was the term that you used. And I was just wondering if you could say a little bit about when you say you figured it out, like what have been some of the lessons, or what are some of the things you feel that you figured out in terms of communicating to different subcultures? And also, sidebar question, are you also connected, is it all Christian faith-based congregations? Are you also working with other faiths?
We also work with non-Christian churches as well. In our incubator site is in Colorado Springs, and there aren't too many Jewish or Muslim faith communities, but there are Unitarian Universalist, which are not Christian. We're open to working with all. Every faith tradition has so much to offer, and there's so much more similar than there is different. So we're certainly open to working with them. And Barb, you could take it from there about the subcultures.
Yeah.
You were the one that brought up subcultures, so you know.
I'll be on. Here's a concrete example of finding. I think you said, how did you find out? Well, I wore pants to meet the pastor of a very traditional church instead of a skirt, and I was sorry that I did that. So a lot of times you can learn by mistake.
Like has been said before by Bevan, it's about knowing your audience and about being respectful. You wouldn't go into someone's home wearing muddy boots, and so knowing your faith community and just being respectful of their culture. And I mean, we do that every day. So I don't think that's any different in the faith community.
Nice. I like that, Barb. I think I'm going to take that. No muddy boots. That's a mantra. But now I want to pass it on to Eunice to just say whatever she wants to share before we close out the call. Eunice.
Thank you for this opportunity. So I'm excited to see this champion chat happen. Hopefully it's the first of many more to come. I just wanted to say, I feel like for a long time, I've been in the Encore space for, almost 20 years now. So I entered this space as a young 20-something person. I've been part of faith congregations since I was born. And the reason I brought up the age segregation or age integration questions, I just think faith communities are, they're one place where multiple generations are still present, although maybe increasingly fewer millennials and some of the younger generations. And I know that's of concern to many faith communities. And I just, many of us have an intuition that faith communities are a place where gen-to-gen activity is already playing out or will play out in a major way. and yet so much of the activity we're connected to is happening in more of a secular environment. And so we're all a little grasping in the dark on how to bring these worlds together, and really appreciate the advice and lived experience of people like you, Barb and Angela and Bevan, the work you're trying to do. And then I'll just say anecdotally that over the last 20 years, both running an Experience Corps program, bringing older adults into public schools as tutors and mentors, and then running a very different kind of program, the Purpose Prize, where we were awarding social innovators who were kind of in the second half of life, doing their biggest, most important contributions to society. I was always fascinated by how many people were doing that work out of their faith background, a sense of purpose, and a desire to make the world a better place because they were being informed by their faith and living that out in a very real way. So the reality is that in the work we do, we're running into really faith-filled people left and right, and wanting to make sure that, you know, this muddy boots analogy, that we are really respectful and honoring of all the work that's happening there. So, you know, I just wanted to say that while Encore and Gen to Gen is not a faith organization, we are really interested in understanding how we can embrace the faith communities of all kinds as part of our campaign and join them in their work that they do too. So we're learners in it with you. Bevan, we're question askers for sure. And we are excited to have more people who are doing this work informed by their faith join us in the learning process. So more to come.
Thank you so much, Eunice. We want to say a resounding thank you to everybody, and I will follow up with these wonderful champions to thank you individually, and thank you to the staff for being muted and unmuted and patiently waiting. Thank you all, and have a great afternoon,
Thanks,
everybody.
Karima.
Thank you.